Chapter 41 of Shakespeare, the biography. Chapter 41, doth relish like enchanting harmony. The Lord Chamberlain's men began performing in June of 1594, but before that date Shakespeare had completed his second long narrative poem. The Rape of Lucrece may have been written at Titchfield while the writer was working under the auspices of the Earl of Southampton, and it is in any case dedicated to the young Earl in effusive terms. The love I dedicate to your lordship, Shakespeare writes, quote, is without end. He goes on to claim that, quote, what I have done is yours, what I have to do is yours, being part in all I have devoted yours. But he had, quote, done, unquote, what he had done was to compose a poem on the rape of Lucrece, the wife of Colantine, by Sextus Tarquinius. The mythical event is dated 509 BC. Dear, is that Greek?
Yes, it is. And he stole it.
He stole it. Do you know that story, the rape?
No, I heard that.
I thought you knew everything.
I remember exactly.
Has been used as an explanation for the rise of the Roman Empire. That's the reason for the rise of the Roman Empire. Shakespeare obtained his theme from the Fasti of Ovid and from the Roman history of Livy. They were standard grammar school texts with which he was well acquainted. See, Shakespeare knew Latin pretty well, or he had to take Latin. There is no direct copying of Ovid's Latin, however. He takes the plot, but not the poetry. He takes only plots there. This suggests one method by which he worked. He took up a copy of the Fasti, read it quickly, then put it down without further reference to it. He needed only the raw material to excite his imagination. The history is not, however, what interests the poet. Yeah, dear, you're not stealing the material. You're just using a story to make it come alive in your own sense. Shakespeare is concerned with the play of feeling between the protagonist as Carton prepares himself to rape the lady, and then after the deed slinks away. The poem is chiefly remarkable for Lucrece's sorrowful meditations after the event. I guess it's about sexual harassment. The course of which she determines to kill herself in front of her husband. The energy and fluency of Shakespeare's verse are again immediately apparent. A poem like his drama begins in medias res. You know what in medias res means? It begins in the middle. I remember that from my Latin. You didn't know I took Latin. Do you know my aunt taught Latin? That Aunt Elsie taught Latin? The poem, like his drama, begins in medias res with a rushing speed, and it maintains its dramatic momentum throughout. He even introduces the word actor into the proceedings. Shakespeare renders everything instinct with palpitating life. The rape of Lucrece is extravagant in diction, elaborate in cadence, filled with paradoxes and appositions, epitaphs and exclamations, conceits and images. It has a vaunting rhythm and an arresting rhyme scheme. It is, in other words, a high-spirited performance in which Shakespeare displays all of his excitement and eloquence. Once more, the pleasure of the reader is equaled only by the pleasure of the writer. The great movement of Shakespeare's dramatic verse can be characterized as one from formal regularity to irregularity. Rhymes, for example, become much less common. In his later plays, too, he pitches the natural stress of English speech against the melodious form of the iambic pentameter. He introduces parentheses, exclamations, and, quote, run-on, unquote, lines that continue the cadence past its usual conclusion. He will also complete the sentence in the middle of the line with a caesura, thus imitating the more irregular disjunctive passages of thought and expression within his characters. There has been traced a characteristic curve in Shakespeare's composition. A rhythmic evolution that reflects the unceasing development of the music of his being. As Praternat observed, rhythm is the basis of Shakespeare's text. He composed and imagined in cadences. His head was filled with cadences, waiting to be born. The rape of Lucrece can also be seen as a mine of gold for Shakespeare's later dramas. He becomes fascinated by the idea of the unquiet conscience and by the murder of innocence. The poem may also be the forerunner of murders in the bed, among them those of Duncan and Desdemona. The musings of Tarquin, the rapist, might also be read as the inner history of Richard III, for which there is no space on the stage. It is the procedure of the great writer. Shakespeare knew what interested him and what preoccupied him only after he had written it down. The dedication of Lucrece may solve a problem concerning Shakespeare's financial status at this time. Where did he obtain the £50,000 that was needed as his premium to become a, quote, sharer in the Lord Chamberlain's men? Much of his income must by now have traveled back to Stratford in order to support his castle. To support his wife, probably. He gave all to travel back. His wife and young family. It may be that the fee was waived on the understanding that he would write a certain number of plays each year. He may have been bequeathed. He may have bequeathed to the Lord Chamberlain's men the ownership of the plays he had already written, or he may have been lent or given the money. There is a report by Nicholas Rowe that my Lord Southampton at one time gave him £1,000 to enable him to go through with a purchase which he heard he had to a mind to. Rowe had acquired the story from one, quote, who was probably well acquainted with the affairs, unquote. Southampton was notably generous, but the sum seems extravagant even by this profligate standards. There is no indication that Shakespeare ever possessed or invested so large an amount of money at any one time. In fact, quote, £1,000, unquote, is a conventionally hyperbolic expression used by Shakespeare himself. It is the sum Falstaff believes that he will receive after Hall's coronation. We may conjecture a figure near £50 or £100. The young Earl may have rewarded the author of Lucrece and Venus and Adonis with this more modest sum. There is another intriguing connection between the rape of Lucrece and a notable family. It has been suggested that the poem was conceived and written under the auspices, or at least under the influence, of Mary Herbert, Countess of Pembroke. She was the sister of Sir Philip Sidney and had in direct tribute cultivated her brother's own literary ideals within her circle. She completed his poetic rendering of the Psalms and was herself a notable translator. She had also created an informal network of literary patronage. And under her direction, 3 neoclassical tragedies were written or translated from French. Mary Herbert herself translated one of them. Each of these tragedies concentrated upon the sufferings of noble heroines, among them Cleopatra and Cornelia, and in deference to Mary Herbert takes an almost feminist reading of women betrayed by a hostile male world. The rape of Lucrece is very much part of this tradition. It is not otherwise clear why Shakespeare would have chosen such an apparently unpromising subject. Samuel Daniel wrote a poem, The Complaint of Rosamond, dedicated to the Countess of Pembroke. This poem also expresses the sorrows of a suffering woman